Hello, everybody. We're back with Deep Images. We are still talking about zombies, to many people's delight and some chagrin, but we're beginning today with Bill Mulligan discussing an all-time classic of the genre.
This is a classic, but it's an interesting film. It's the kind they don't make anymore, and yet I almost did. So this film is Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things from 1972. This is pretty early on in the modern zombie uh, epics, and surprisingly, when you look at it, there was Night of the Living Dead, and I'm always under the impression, boy, this just changed the world, and yet it's actually several years before zombies build on what Romero did. And it tell you the truth, it's not until Dawn of the Dead, 1978, quite a bit later, 10 years later, that the zombies really start taking their rightful place in modern monsters. So it didn't happen overnight. To be perfectly honest, it's not really until the 90s into the early 2000s when zombies basically became their own section of Blockbuster Video, where
Yeah.
there was so every week had a new zombie film or two or three coming out. Once the dam broke, it broke, but it was a slow rollout here. Children Should Play with Dead Things is interesting in that I believe, if I'm looking at the chronology right, it's the first film, and this is 4 years after Night of the Living Dead, that kind of took Romero's premise of zombies themselves are not that interesting. Cannibals themselves are not that interesting, but zombie cannibals, yeah. And but this is an odd film. It's directed by Bob Clark. So right off the bat, Bob Clark is kind of an interesting cat. When you look at his filmography, it's like there's two Bob Clarks.
We
There's
uh
the Bob.
we we talked about
Yeah.
him on the last episode because Chuck actually did Death Dream, but
Okay,
I
and Death
definitely want to
Dream's
hear your
brilliant.
input on him. Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, so Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Thing, Death Dream, Black Christmas. Black Christmas, super influential. It's
Oh
hard
yeah.
to believe
Oh
there
yeah.
would be Halloween without Black Christmas, and still one of the best slasher movies ever made. Bleak ending, really good photography. He did Murder by Decree,
Saw that in the
Sherlock Holmes
theater.
versus uh, you know uh, Jack the Ripper. Then he did Porky's. Porky's is not a great film, but it made a lot of money, and it's a good example of the kind of raunchy comedy. Porky's 2 the next day, and then A Christmas Story. You can't imagine two more different films than Porky's 2 the next day and A Christmas Story. And you're like, what is this guy trying to say? But all this stuff is good and successful. Then he does Rhinestone. Holy crap, what
Oh,
a
he
piece
did
of
that.
garbage. Yeah. So like when
Jeez.
he tried to go Hollywood, just one of the worst. Everyone loves Dolly Parton, but boy, oof, just about killed her movie career there. And then toward the end, Baby Geniuses. Oof.
Oh
But
yeah.
but way
Man.
better than Baby Geniuses too. He's just an odd guy. It's hard to figure out what coherent worldview from his films. But he died young, sadly, in a car accident. One of the things he was planning on doing is remaking this film.
Mm.
Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is a really personal film for me for two main reasons. One, first time I talked to my wife, my current and final wife, um, we just got on the phone, discovered we had a lot in common, and out of the blue, because as goofy and nerd as I am, I would not think to use this as a line on a woman. She just said to me, "Have you ever seen a film called Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things?" And I think right then and there, I said to myself, "This one's a keeper."
Yep.
Because
Yes.
yes, I had, but I never imagined in a million years I would meet a actual female woman who would have seen it. So yeah, we obviously had a lot in common. And the other big one is a few years ago, before virus that I shall not mention because it messes up your algorithms, killed everything. We came this close to doing a remake. And this would have been really something. But let me talk about the original first. So this is a strange movie. This is a movie that only could have been made in 1972. It's a grindhouse movie where I think the first two-thirds of the movie is about a troupe of unlikable characters who go to an island. They are led by Alan, you soon when you see the credits, you realize almost everyone's name is their actual name, which is the sign that you're working with a bunch of friends who may not be professional actors. And the easiest thing to keep them from forgetting their character's name is to just name the character after them.
Right.
That's a good
And
trick.
in real life, they were theater people.
And they're overacting. It's a comedy, although you will be hard pressed to laugh. Where Alan, the director, who is one of the most awful characters ever to grace cinema, and we're talking about there's been what 11,000 movies about Hitler, and yet Alan from Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is giving De Fuhrer a run for his money. He's awful. He is awful. Think of the worst boss you ever had. Think of like you're starving and you got to work for someone, but you hate them. That's Alan, and he's a narcissist. He's the leader of the troop, the director, I guess, and he's bringing these actors, his children, he calls them, to this island, and he's messing with them. At some point, they dig up a body, and he performs this ritual to raise them from the dead, calling for Satan. You think he's just messing with them because he's been like having people dressed up as zombies, scaring them and doing all kinds of stuff. But when it doesn't work, he seems disappointed. Like, dude, you thought that was going to work? I mean, I hate to break the news to you, but magic doesn't work. You know,
I've known too many of these people.
Yeah, I don't want to upset any Wiccans out there. Believe what you want, but listen, if it worked, you'd all be millionaires and good looking. But anyway, yeah. So yeah. Anyway, he gets really mad. His girlfriend makes fun of him, or his ex-girlfriend, I guess. We spend over an hour with these characters and really don't get to know them very well. And what little we do get to know, we don't like. That's a problem. And then almost like I have a feeling they were cutting this movie together and they're like, oh, geez, our movie sucks. It's a comedy and there's nothing funny about it. What the hell can we do? And then a little silent voice in the back of the room spoke up and said, why don't we put actual zombies in it? And they're like, you're a genius. Because all out of nowhere, after they're all bickering and moaning and everything, and he's taken the body that he was trying to resurrect and he's kind of bringing it back to a house and implying they're going to have necrophilia with it. And finally, everyone just gets tired of his shit and they're ready to leave. But when you know it, the dead rise, and all of a sudden, this lame-o comedy turns into a kick-ass zombie movie with terrific special effects by the guy who plays Alan. His name is Alan Ormsby. He also co-wrote this with Bob Clark. He's a good makeup artist. He actually wrote some books I remember reading as a kid about how to do
He
makeup
also
stuff. It's
he also wrote Deranged, which we talked about earlier.
yes, the guy has a significant role in these early exploitation films. I wish he'd done more. Seems like an interesting person, still alive.
Hmm.
Very
These
nice
zombies,
man.
yeah, really. I say I've never gotten the chance to talk to him, but I really would like to for reasons I'll get to in a minute. Um, the zombies come out. They are the Romero cannibal zombies. When people try to escape, we suddenly cut over and there's their guts hanging out. The gore is very gory, not just for 72, but just effective. They're creepy looking. They're more toward the Fulci zombies with that, their rottedness. They've been sitting in the ground for a long time. They're resurrected not by a mysterious satellite, by power of Satan, voodoo, whatever. And they're out for blood. And now it's survival. Now once again we're trapped in the house and we're trying to get out on an island. There's no, the music has this weird atonal. I got a friend who has a synthesizer and he kind of knows how to use it, sort of thing. It really works. The cinematography occasionally crosses into genius. It's unrealistic. I mean, it's one of those movies where all the monsters have backlighting that has no explanation, but I don't care. It looks cool. I got
But it has a
dry
lot of those
ice.
really deep blacks, so you don't see in movies anymore. I love.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Like it's filmed on some good stock that they bought. It's got the bright colors. Oh, the colors are great, especially because these are 1972 fashions, and they are some of the ugliest ass clothing you will ever see in your life. Alan's
Yeah.
pants, Alan's pants are more terrifying than the zombies. So yeah, there's that. It's definitely a movie of its time, which brings up one thing. Its portrayal of a couple of gay characters probably set gay rights back to the 1500s. And that's something that's something you do see in early 70s films like Blackula, where
Yeah.
they're kind of progressive in that they acknowledge gay people exist, but their role is very much step and fetch it. You know, they're playing the role that Stepin Fetchit would have been. They're comical and sissies who are easy to make fun of and just stereotypical, over the top, effeminate,
Very
unlikable,
high camp.
very high camp. Um, but man, when the zombies come out, they're great, and it's got that downbeat 70s ending that all horror movies were kind of required to have, which again reminds me of Fulci's Zombie. I kind of wonder. Of course, Fulci had seen Night of the Living Dead and was emulating it, but really there's a lot more in common with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. This movie got a fairly good release because the executive producer was Ted B. Mickles, who
I like him.
was a cool character. I did get to meet him, and he was every bit the character that he portrayed.
Very cool.
He was playing the role of Ted for his entire life, and he was great up to the very end. He was a cool guy. So this movie is just so odd. Now, you could do this back in the day because we didn't have VCRs. This movie would have been turned off in the first 20 minutes. If someone goes in green watching it, they're just going to flick to something else. But you're at a drive-in. You're there. There's nowhere to go. You sit there, and these grindhouse movies would do that, where the first half, or in this case, I think more than half, is one film, and then it's like you flick a switch, and it's suddenly a whole new film. And the setup, the lameness of the first half of this movie makes the second half even better.
Yeah.
You're almost feel like you've been duped into believing you're going to see one thing and then you see something else. It's brilliant. It's not anything you can do these days. So this has always been a favorite of mine because they would show it only late night. They didn't edit it amazingly. And after watching this, then you got to go to bed. And I'm like, I'm too scared to go to bed, but you got to go to sleep. So this is always a favorite of mine. Even acknowledging that the first half was pretty dopey. I don't know how I actually got through it, but what the heck? I set the alarm clock. It was 2 a.m. I'm going to cut through it.
Well, you didn't have
And
you didn't have a chorus of people on the internet back then going, "I hate slow movies." We
yeah.
just watched them to see what happened.
And sometimes you found nuggets, and sometimes
Right.
you didn't. There's an awful lot of crap that they used to show that I haven't seen in years, and I'm pretty sure if I watched The Four Skulls of Jonathan Drake, I'm pretty sure if I saw it again, I'd hate it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But I did love some of those PRC monogram films, Man Who Turned to Stone. Yeah, some of them do hold up in their own lame way. This movie is simultaneously lame and great, and I begin to appreciate that maybe there was more deliberate. The lameness of the first part may not have been completely accidental, because it's hard to believe the quality and competence that they show in the last part compared to what appears initially to be kind of making it up as we go along in the first part. That it's hard to believe that wasn't a deliberate choice. Anyway, years go by, and I wrote a film called Belladonna that was made by director Brett Mullen, who's a really talented local filmmaker.
Cool.
And he calls me up one day and tells me he's got the rights to Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And I'm like, oh my God, please let me write this. And so I spent some time on this, and it was very difficult because I have always hated it when you see people doing remakes and the first thing out of their mouth is like, we're going to fix all the things that sucked about the original. And I'm thinking, dude, if you think the first one sucked, maybe you shouldn't be the one writing the remake.
I feel like Hollywood deliberately hires those people.
Yeah, it's like when they made the American Godzilla and they were talking how they're going to fix all the problems with Godzilla. It's like, I don't think Godzilla has a problem. It's one of the most successful series in film history. It has a loyal, devoted fan base. Yes, I do realize you can't make can't make Godzilla versus Megalon on a big budget and expect that it's going to do well. I get that. Maybe you need to shut your pie hole about all the things you don't like about Godzilla, because the ones who are reading this article are people like me who love Godzilla. So
you notice the guy who made Godzilla -1 wasn't like that.
No, he wasn't. And
he was a fan.
And that's the trick. That's why Marvel was initially so successful. It's easy to look at Guardians of the Galaxy and laugh at these characters that are ludicrous. Raccoon, a talking tree. I mean, whatever. But they went in there. Yeah, they played it straight. And if you play it straight and you respect the source material, we, the viewer, will also respect it mostly. Anyway, so there was my challenge because I was like, this first half is not what we can do these days. These characters are not what would be acceptable these days. How do we, and I don't want to say fix it because the film's not broken. The original film is great, but it's of its time. How do I take this and make it something that would be acceptable now without going too far in it, other directions? And I think I was successful. I really love the script. I really love the script. I took a few things that I thought that maybe they should have done in the first one. One of the characters, Anya, is a strange little goth woman who seems to be, like she knows the spirits. They
She's kind
speak
of
to her.
the witch character, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like her.
I liked her too, and she's actually the only likable character of the bunch. That's one of the first things I try to fix is try to make some of these characters likable. Other than Alan, Alan is awful, and they did a great job, and I pretty much just kept him as awful as anything else. I used a lot of the actual lines that they use because some of the jokes are good, especially when they're making fun of Alan. But I made Anya even more aware that she is seeing things, and the zombies end up having a certain uh, respect for her. I wanted to throw the audience at least one bone.
It's very
The
voodoo
gore,
like.
we ramped up the gore a bit more. We just made, and one of the obvious changes, I didn't take the gay characters out, but I made them actual people.
Hmm.
Um, gave them something, to do because boy, that would just you'd burn down the theater if you had characters like that now. I thought it was great. Brett took the script to Alan Ormsby and let him read it, and he told me Alan liked it, and that was
Oh wow.
as great a compliment because I was, that meant a lot. That really
Yeah.
meant a lot to me because I do respect what he did and what film they made. And then I'm thinking, oh man, this is gonna be great. I am actually going to get to cast my wife as one of the extra zombies because she was
Oh.
like, when I told her all about this, like, do you think I can be in it? Like, I'm pretty sure I can wrangle that. It's like all the stars were aligning, everything was coming together, and we had our Black Swan virus event that pretty much put the kibosh on things for a while. And unfortunately, when you option these things, you only have a limited amount of time to actually film it. And Brett was already got hit hard that a film he was making got about halfway done, and then the virus shut everything down. It had a bunch of kids in it, and by the time filmmaking could start again, the kids didn't look like the kids anymore.
Oof.
So he took a hurt on that. There's a lot of stories like that from that time. So unfortunately, the rights relapsed and someone else bought it. It's possible that the work we were doing on it was actually generating enough interest. This is one of those snake bit productions that it has not had a remake, although it has been slated for being remade many, many times,
Mm-hmm.
including Bob Clark was going to remake it when he died. It just seems like this film has a curse on it. Every time somebody wants to remake it, something bad happens. So I blame our project for throwing the world into chaos. I mean, I still have the script, and if I
Will you
probably
send
end
that
up,
to us at some
oh,
point?
sure. I'll probably end up cannibalizing all the good parts of it for other projects. But if anyone,
That's what
if
good
anyone
writers
who's
do.
working on Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is looking for a script, it's still there.
It's there.
But yeah, so right. That's a little it's a disappointment, but it's still a film I have such a warm spot in my heart for. It's so strange, so not good and amazing at the
Mm.
same time. And just again, a film of its time. You cannot make movies like that anymore. Tarantino tried with From Dusk Till Dawn, where his goal was that people went into this thinking it was a heist movie and then it
Right.
became a vampire movie. But of course, anyone who looked at the poster or the interviews or the trailer would know it's a vampire movie because they are
Yeah.
not going to do that. They are not going to release a vampire movie that doesn't tell you that it's a vampire movie. And even if they did within the first day, all the reviews would spoil it. We no longer live in a world where you can go unless you deliberately
The only
unhook
guy
yourself
who's got
from
away
social
with it
media.
is David Lynch with The Return.
Mm,
Everybody signed an ironclad NDA. There was not one indication on the internet from one episode to another about one thing ever leaked.
that's cool.
Lynch must have spent part of his personal fortune buying people off because I'm like, how did he do that?
Yeah, it's but it's a mm, that it's too bad because that was kind of fun sometimes. Now, of course, most of the time you'd go to a film sight unseen, and it was like, oh, I wish I'd still unseen it. Most things are crap, but it was worth going to get those little nuggets to be surprised, to be shocked. And a lot of the Grindhouse movies were like that. Macon County Line is about two brothers
Oh,
having wacky adventures until suddenly it isn't.
Yeah,
yeah.
it gets pretty
Oh,
And
dark.
that's great. That's yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's terrific because you got to know these
I watched
characters.
that recently for the first time ever.
that's a heavy flick.
I used to
It
see
is.
the trailers in the drive-ins where my parents would sneak me in to see other movies, and I remember that trailer. The movie we went to see was Buster and Billy.
Oh, well, there's another one.
Another one that
There's another
turns on you toward
That's
the end, and you're
another
like,
one. Buster and Billy. It's a romance,
but
until it becomes a revenge flick. And I
yeah.
love that because you're
Mhm.
in for the ride. You don't know what you're going to get. There's lots of twists and turns. I mean,
That's
yeah,
what
it's
I love
something
about
for everybody.
Asian movies, man, because you never know what could happen.
And sometimes the trailer, I mean, as I remember the trailer for Macon County Line, I thought it was like Race with the Devil or was it Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry or whatever.
Hmm.
Where it looks like it's a lot of car, but even those will take you by surprise. Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry has one of the most out of nowhere punch to the gut endings. I will not give it away, but it's like,
Yes.
damn,
Race with the Devil was the very first movie I saw in my life
wow,
where the good guys didn't win. We watched it on TV together, me and my parents, and for the first time that I can remember, all three of us were totally quiet at the end.
yeah, yeah. Well, that was the '70s for you. That's
Yep.
the That's the Vietnam influence where things don't always have a happy ending, and that was reflected.
Easy Rider blew my mind when I first saw that.
Right, right.
God.
And even back then, you realize how stupid Hollywood was because after it was over, they're like, "We're going to try to make a sequel to Easy Rider." It's like, did you guys watch Easy Rider? Because I don't think that's going to happen. And he's like, "Well, I'm sure they learned their lesson." No, then they did I Am Legend with Will Smith and ended it the way they did. And then they're like, "We'd like to do a sequel. Are you sure you want to do a sequel? Have you watched your movie?" But I guess their solution is they're going to pretend that they did not end it the way they ended it. They're going to pretend the way that they ended it the way they originally ended it before they let people talk them out of that.
Yeah, I remember Keith talked about that when we reviewed
Just,
the I Am
just
Legend stuff.
an amazing delusion there. But yeah, Hollywood has always been
I
stupid.
thought I thought a great movie you've probably all seen is Electra Glide in Blue, which is the flip side of
Mhm.
Easy Rider.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Haven't
Ends,
seen
it
it, but I know about
ends
it.
the same way, but it's the flip. It's about the cop
Yeah.
versus the hippies, and you're supposed to
Mhm.
sympathize with the cop in this case. And you're also like, damn, what a bummer.
You're also like watching those movies, like whoever made this has a total bicycle fetish.
Oh yeah.
See that a lot with these exploitation movies where I think he's like the guy. I think the guy made this movie because he's really into, and then fill in the blank on what they're into.
Of course.
You know, I mean, sometimes it's obvious. Kenneth Anger, man, that guy really likes leather. Sure, why not? Quentin Tarantino, man, he loves feet. Any chance he gets to work that in.
Everybody has a
Oh,
fetish, man,
yeah.
of some kind.
Everyone's got something, but not everybody is a director who gets to actually have famous people indulge in their
Yes.
fetish. It's good to be king.
What
So
do you
there you go.
guys what do you guys
Children.
think? Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Oh no, go ahead. Anybody
Yeah,
else
I
watched
was
it?
going to say the same thing you were. Go ahead, Bill. About these guys. You've
Yeah,
seen
yeah. Oh, sure.
Children.
Have you guys seen this marvelous masterpiece that was shot in 2 weeks for $50,000, which wasn't much even back in 1974 if you're making a movie.
No, Night of
Oh,
the Living
yeah.
Dead costs 115,000 amazingly.
Wow.
I always wanted to see it back then because I heard so much about it. Finally, I did see it and I loved it. Yeah. I I thought it was much better than I expected for the time.
Hmm.
So I thought, yeah, this is really well done. So
Mhm.
after hearing you talk about it, I want to see it again now.
I had it on VHS, but I've never owned it on digital. Have you seen it, Chuck?
Children shouldn't play with dead things.
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, no, that was one of the movies. It was like back in the very kind of Genesis days of the Abbey of the Lemur, and my roommate and I had a factory job. We were just starting to mess with video, and we were just snorting speed to stay awake, and we were just doing. It was a point in time where it was just nightly, just every weekend booze and drugs and zombie movies and art films and anime and whatever we could get our hands on, and that was in the mix somewhere. And I remember that very distinctly, although a lot of that time is kind of a blur. And yeah, I distinctly remember that. And of course, later I hooked up with Heather, and of course, she was a huge fan of the movie. And,
Yeah, I've heard her.
we've watched it a bunch of times.
So. Is that on Blu-ray? Does anyone know?
Probably.
I'm sure it must. I may have even fallen into
I think
public
so.
domain. It seems like a lot of people have released versions of it.
Because Anchor Bay put it out on VHS. That was one of their early releases because they were on top of every fucking cult movie you wanted to find. Anchor Bay
Yeah.
put it out in like first 3 years of their existence. But that went out of print quick, and I know it came out on DVD, and one of the DVDs that I saw was a kind of a crappy public domain-ish company.
Mhm.
But I was telling these guys earlier, Bill, that one of the movies, Deranged, either just has or is about to come out on Blu-ray officially finally. So
Mm.
that's cool. So maybe this will, pop up. Maybe Shout Factory or Arrow. Who knows?
Now, I don't know if this is going to be one of those where when you see the Blu-ray, you're going to be like, "Oh my God, what a revelation! This film is fantastic looking." It's cheap. It's cheap, and it's going to look cheap. And if they dick around too much with the contrast and the grain and everything, I've seen them do that with some movies that were like shot on 16 mil, Andy Milligan type movies, and it doesn't really improve things. It makes it look AI or something.
They're trying to do
whatever that-
modern color
Yeah.
correction on those movies,
Yeah,
and they do
whatever
need color
setting.
correction, but it's kind of too late.
But yeah. They are. It is what it is. Don't mess around with Dawn of the Dead to try to make the blood look like something better than poster paint. That's part of its charm. It is what it is.
Criterion did a good job on Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up for today, and we're going to be back with another episode on zombies shortly. Remember, everyone, to like and subscribe, please. We desperately need your help. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.